Hey everyone, welcome back to Honest About the Irish, brought to you by yours truly, B-Man is Mad. Now, there's something that I want to dive into, guys. You've heard about my dream scenario where Notre Dame sweeps through Clemson, beats them in the ACC championship game, goes into the semifinal playoff game before the national championship game here in a couple weeks, or I should say 3 weeks. And they face Alabama in the national championship game and avenge their loss from 2012, and all things would be good and gold in Notre Dame land, and Notre Dame would be back, and it would be returned to glory, and Notre Dame would win the national championship. But that hasn't happened because it is a pipe dream scenario, which is really highly unlikely. Now, there is a dark side to this where there could be a nightmare scenario, and let me tell you about B-Man's nightmare scenario, okay? Two things that we're going to get into here are, of course, the nightmare scenario and a new segment that I'm going to have on my show called You Have Been F5'd by B-Man. And I will get into that, and that is going to revolve around the Big Ten Conference, which is a complete joke, and Ohio State. Now, let's start off the show by saying, let's say that Notre Dame goes up into North Carolina next weekend at the ACC championship game, and they're ready. You think they're ready. You think it's going to be a back and forth game like the first game, but Trevor Lawrence is back, and Clemson has the equal amount of talent, maybe even better than Notre Dame, and a lot of their injuries have recovered since that first meeting. And Trevor Lawrence wants revenge, and Clemson wants revenge, and Notre Dame, let's say, is a little laxed. They're a little too relaxed, and they get obliterated. They get blown out. Let's say like 56-7 or 49-14, something in those lines, okay? And let's just say it's absolutely terrible. Notre Dame doesn't even show up. Let's say that it's back to me screaming about how bad Brian Kelly prepared his team and this and that, and how I've been wasting my time. It's bad. It looks like the Notre Dame of old from the last 15 years before 2020. And let's say the college football playoff committee decides not to put Notre Dame in there because of their poor performance against Clemson, and they are number 5 looking in from the outside. Let's say somehow either Florida or Texas A&M somehow, some other school outside looking in now, sneaks in and takes that 4th spot, and it's Alabama, Clemson, and then, of course, Ohio State, which is a complete joke right now, what I'll get into. And the 4th spot, final spot, would either be Texas A&M or Florida. That would be a stab in the gut for every Notre Dame fan, including B-Man. And that would ruin the whole season for me. What would be the point of the season? Notre Dame joins the conference because of COVID-19. They beat everyone on their schedule when people were crying that they never joined a schedule because they handpicked their schedules when they were independent. And then they join the conference. They get to the ACC championship game, the conference championship game. They beat everyone on their schedule when, in fact, they were being criticized all year for the schedule being too easy, so we got to go back to that. They beat Clemson, number 1 team in the country at the time. Yes, it was without Trevor Lawrence. Notre Dame has overcome so many obstacles. Brian Kelly proved everyone wrong, and so did Ian Book every weekend, in and out with wins. They go to the ACC championship game, and after all that hard work and all that positive press they've been getting all year is pushed out the window because of one bad game. I mean, it's bound to happen for Notre Dame to have a terrible game and get blown out and lose. We've seen it with every team. There's just some teams that know how to cope with it better. And that's what really bothers me about this, is that Notre Dame, the Irish, could have a terrible game against Clemson, and Clemson can be 99.9% almost perfect against the Irish here next week in North Carolina in the ACC championship game. And after all that hard work, and after everything I've said, Notre Dame is pushed number 5, and they're out because of that one bad performance. Now, this is very highly unlikely. I still see Notre Dame, worst case scenario, going into the 4th spot. And Ohio State being at 3rd, and possibly maybe Clemson at 2nd, but they'll probably put Ohio State in at 2nd since they don't have a loss, and they haven't played 6 games. And by the way, the Big Ten's a joke. What would be the point after all that? After how much Notre Dame has accomplished so much? The season would be over for me. It would be ruined. They'd go to a bowl game, but would it matter? The point of this season was for Notre Dame to win a national championship. Like, Brian Kelly had a special feeling going into this season that this was going to be a special year, and so far he's been proven right. Now, if you lose that game in a really terrible fashion, and you're pushed out looking in, and it's happened to Notre Dame before, 1993, after they beat Florida State. They dominated Florida State in that game in 1993. You know, the number 1, number 2, the game of the century, Charlie Ward on Florida State, Bobby Bowden on Florida State, the greatest college football team ever assembled since the Miami football teams of the late 80s. Notre Dame dominated them in the first half, and I was at that game with my dad. I remember. Notre Dame pushed them aside, and of course it came late at the end because, you know, it was a game of the century. It wasn't going to be a blowout or one-sided. Notre Dame wins that game. They beat the number 1 team in the country. Then the next week, they completely choked, completely fell apart. Their defense was terrible against Boston College. A lot of people think that's the reason why they were pushed out of the national championship game in 1993. But the point is that their defense gave up so many yards. Their defense gave up so many points in that game. They were down at 17 in the fourth quarter. They came back and went ahead by 2 points, and then Boston College went down the field, kicked the field goal, and Notre Dame lost that game as the time expired. And the next week, Notre Dame was pushed out of the national championship game and ended up settling for the Cotton Bowl against Texas A&M, and Florida State went on to win the national championship game playing against Nebraska. And I remember my dad getting a bumper sticker, a yellow bumper sticker that he put on his 1987 Saab. I think it was a 300 Saab 300 or Saab 500 turbo cars. By the way, those were great cars. That said national championship, or excuse me, Notre Dame 31, national championships 24. Notre Dame should have played Nebraska that year in the national championship. I don't care what you said. Notre Dame beat the number 1 team in the country, and they just had one bad game against Boston College, and their defense shit in their pants the next weekend. That was just one bad occasion. If this scenario happens again to Notre Dame, where they have a terrible game against Clemson and they are pushed out again, I'm going to flip the F out on this channel. And I am speaking from a true fan. And if that happens, then you know, I'm not going to say rigged or fixed because I'm not a conspiracy theorist. And by the way, you cannot say rigged, the word that starts with an E that just happened in November with our presidential rate. You cannot say that because you'll be violated on YouTube and it'll be taken down. So I cannot say rigged E word in November with the presidential election, but I can say that some people might think that this playoff program is not necessarily rigged or fixed or stolen, but it's not ran right. If Notre Dame does get pushed out after all they've done all year, and let's say they do have a bad game, it's bound to happen, a terrible game where they get blown out by Clemson. And listen, I've been saying this all year. It is very tough to beat a team twice in college football that has the equal amount of talent as you, even if it's better. Being that it might be better, I should say. It could happen. But if Notre Dame does get pushed out, and they're number 5 and a one-loss team in there sneaks in there, like I said, Florida or Texas A&M, then I'm going to question the whole committee and how it's being done. Because that would be complete BS if that happens to Notre Dame twice in my lifetime. Now, this is just a hypothetical dark side of the force, nightmarish scenario, which I don't think it's going to happen. I still think that Notre Dame has an 80% chance of making it to the playoffs, and they will. But if that were to happen, and this was a fixed college football committee, or the conspiracy theorists would come out, I wouldn't necessarily say that, but I would say something needs to be put in question here. You need to hire better people to run this, because let's just hope that doesn't happen, because I will go complete bananas on this channel, and I will rip into the committee, and I will just give up for the 2020 season for Notre Dame, because Notre Dame needs to win a national championship for college football, for fans, and to piss off all the naysayers. And even, yes, sometimes prove my channel wrong, because as you heard before, I am very critical of the Irish on this channel, because, like I said, I am honest. Now, that being said, I'm going to take a week off from Notre Dame, because they're not playing this weekend. I'm going to relax, and I'm probably going to do a show next week, doing the ACC preview championship game, maybe some sort of preview channel, you know, my predictions and stuff like that. And then, of course, I'll have my post-game reaction to after that game next Saturday. Game starts at 3 o'clock my time on ABC. Now, let's push that aside with the nightmare scenario, and let's talk about my new segment where I'm going to have You've Been F5'd by B-Man is Man, or I'll just say my F5 of the week. I love the WWE. I love Brock Lesnar. I think Brock Lesnar is one of the greatest wrestlers in the WWE of all time. He has the best signature move. He has the best finishing move in wrestling, and that is called the F5, where he picks you up, puts you over his shoulders, spins you around like an F5 tornado, hence the word F5, and you land face first, and you are completely physically dominated and destroyed, and you're devastated. And Brock Lesnar gets on top of you and pins you 1, 2, 3, and you lose the match. That's a very devastating wrestling move, but I'm going to do my verbal F5. B-Man's verbal F5 of the week. I got to come up with a saying for it. But let's just say the F5 of the week. And that is the Big Ten Conference, and that is the Ohio State University. And let me pause for a minute so I can drink some water, clear my throat, and just completely rip into my first F5 segment, and that is the Big Ten / Ohio State University. Now, beginning of the summer, there was pressure on the Big Ten Conference. Other conferences were canceling their football season. Other conferences were pushing their fall sports until next year because of COVID-19. And the Big Ten was put in a corner. The Big Ten was put in a spot that was very uncomfortable. So the Big Ten decided, I think it was in August, to postpone all fall sports. And then all the parents started to cry, all the football players started to cry, all the athletic department heads started to cry because two things were going to happen. They were going to lose money. They were going to lose TV revenue. And the parents were unhappy because they wanted their kids to play in sports, which I get it. I am not a parent. I don't understand that love, so I cannot give my true honest opinion about it. But the whole thing was a complete junk show. And it was embarrassing. The Big Ten embarrassed themselves. Then, of course, our president of the United States, I don't know if I'm allowed to say his name on here, so I won't say his name. Our current president of the United States, not our new president that's going to be after January 16th, but the current one from 2016, our president. I'm not giving him any positive press because I don't know if I'm allowed to do that either without being restricted by YouTube, by the way, who's very sensitive about positive reviews of Trump. But, oh, I said his name, President Trump, so this video is probably going to be taken down, so I'll try to say this as quickly as I can without being restricted. But during the time President Trump was tweeting about putting pressure on the Big Ten to redoing their season and reopening their season, and of course the Big Ten folded under pressure and started up their season and had a 8-game schedule, I believe, and the rule was that if they did not play 6 games, their team, whoever it was, no matter who it was, would not qualify for the Big Ten championship game, which is played in Indianapolis. And, of course, Ohio State is 5-0, and, of course, Ohio State is a darling of college football. Now, if this was Rutgers, and Rutgers was undefeated, and Rutgers had a breakout year, believe me, folks, this wouldn't have happened. Rutgers would have been screwed because it's not the Ohio State and it's not Michigan, by the way, who is the greatest college football program in all of sports and who's not even going to go to a bowl game this year. And it's wonderful. But you know what? I think the committee is going to feel sorry since the Big Ten's changing everything and everything's being changed. They might even put Michigan in a New Year's Day bowl game. I wouldn't be surprised. As much love as they get because they are such a wonderful, great program. But listen to me, folks. If it was anyone else, they would be pushed aside and said, no, you can't go in because you don't have 6 wins. Too many of your games were canceled. A bunch of shit. Excuse me to cuss, but a bunch of crock of crap. Ohio State has no business being in there. And, of course, the Big Ten had to change the rule. It should be Indiana or Northwestern. Yes, I know that Ohio State beat Indiana in the year, but you set in the beginning of earlier in the year, but you set these rules and you have to lead by example. And you did not do that. You had to change the rules. Now the Big Ten You've completely embarrassed yourself twice this year. You folded under political pressure from our president of the United States, who I'm probably not allowed to say his name because I'll get myself in trouble. And you folded under pressure with the rule because you know Ohio State brings you in money and it's all about the dollar signs. You know Ohio State, the biggest program in your conference, would save your conference by being in that Big Ten championship game and possibly playing in the college football national championship game and the college football format when they get there, after they win the national championship, after they win the Big Ten championship game, most likely against Northwestern. I mean, what the hell happened? And I hate to say this, because I really don't care for the Big Ten. And there's a few teams in the Big Ten that I like. Wisconsin, I have no problems with Indiana or Purdue or Rutgers. It's just mostly Michigan. And Ohio State's annoying. They're just annoying. They're like a fly in the ointment. But I don't necessarily hate them like I do Michigan. And I really hate to say this because I would have given the Big Ten credit about leading by an example earlier in the season if they didn't cave under political pressure from our president of the United States that I'm not going to say. I've already broken my rule by saying his name. And like I said, this video won't be on YouTube very long because it'll be restricted. However, if the Big Ten had stood up and said, no, we are not going to shut down our season, or excuse me, we're not going to reopen our season. We're going to hold to our true belief that this virus is terrible and we need to sit down and take a loss and wait until next year, then we'll restart the season. I would have given them some credit. I would have given them some praise. I would have said you had the balls, you had the strength, you had the courage, and you had the know-how to run your conference. And you showed everyone else who decided to play football, yes, the ACC and Notre Dame, I would give you some compliment. I would respect you. But no, you completely did a 190. And like I said, you caved. And then you're going to put in Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. And they shouldn't even be there according to one of your rules, but you'll change the rules because it's the Ohio State. I would have given you respect. I would have given you, like a pat in the back for standing up to political pressure. I mean, then we had parents, we had people protesting in front of the Big Ten building. I believe it is, as you can hear my dog barking, excuse me, as it is in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. They were out there protesting before they caved in and opened the season back up. It just, folks, I love college football. I love sports, but sometimes sports are not as important of other things. And to me, it seems like money is more important than life. And I know I sound like a hypocrite because I had a podcast on here that we need live sports. That's fine, use your opinion. But when you do one thing, and then a couple weeks later or a month later, and you completely 190, and you open up, it just looks bad. So, having, on Fox Sports 1, having Urban Meyer on there with Colin Cowherd, giving Ohio State's case for 5 minutes I had a problem with it because Urban Meyer irks me. And I've got some stories about Urban Meyer I could tell you. I wish I could tell you on this channel about people I know that know him personally, how much of an a-hole he is because he's a jerk. Now, I'm not going to do that because I want to get myself in trouble and I'm not going to get sued or anything. I don't even know what my rights are about that. But I've heard stories from people who know Urban Meyer personally, and he is not a nice person. And, well, he wins football games. Who cares, right? That's all that matters. But him being on there with Colin Cowherd and this whole thing defending them, because Fox Sports has, of course, they own the rights to the Big Ten Network. They have a love affair with Ohio State. It just irked me. It rubbed me the wrong way. So, Ohio State, Big Ten Network, you are the #1 F5 of the week by B-Man is Mad. You were the first F5 segment. Many to come. And this F5 segment will mostly be revolved around dumb athletes making comments, making stupid comments. It's stupid, terrible play in Sports Week. It might even be a Notre Dame player. It might even be Brian Kelly making a terrible coaching mistake. But you get the drift. You get the idea. 99.9% sports rant where I will completely just go off. And congratulations, Ohio State. Congratulations, Big Ten Network, for caving in the pressure and completely embarrassing himself. You have been F-I'd by B-Man is mad. That is all, folks. Please hit that subscribe button. Please like this video. I'd really appreciate that. Go Irish. I'll see you later on down the week. Stay safe.